Okay, pastors and leaders, let's talk about 3 teaching principles. Now, these are principles that we use in our library. When we write sermons, when I preach sermons, I'm thinking about these 3 things. It's kind of a framework for understanding preaching. It's actually really a good way to assess your preaching. You'll see some assessment tools in our resources for assessing someone's preaching. This is how we know we've won in our preaching. We assess it by these 3 teaching principles. So here they are. Here's the first one. Teach the Bible. Our goal is to proclaim the truth of God's word. That's your goal. Now, that doesn't mean that it's only the Bible. We're not saying that it has to be, verse by verse or anything like that. It's just that at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you understand that you are teaching the Bible. You're trying to teach a biblical worldview, how to think about life and faith with a biblical worldview in mind. So, which automatically, by the way, means that you're preaching Jesus too. If you're preaching the Bible, you're preaching Jesus because the Bible is about Jesus. So all of our sermons are Christ-centered, are Bible-based sermons. So if you notice our talking points, this one's actually really pretty easy to do. This first principle is pretty easy to follow if you're using our resources, because we prepare all of our resources with this in mind. We want to preach the Bible. Keep it simple. Preach the Bible. But what's important is, remember, you're going to be taking, as a teacher, you're going to be taking our talking points and you're going to be adding your own stories and examples and passion to it, your own experience to it. So if you don't really know the Bible, if you don't have clarity on the Bible, if you don't have clarity on this point in this sermon or on the sermon overall, like if you don't have clarity because you don't really know the Bible, well, then you need to get a little more clarity on the Bible before you try to get up there and preach, because our resources aren't going to be really helpful for you if you don't really just have a real basic fundamental understanding of the Bible, because you need to remember to preach the Bible and make sure it's obvious that you love God's word. Okay, here's the second principle for great teaching, and this is, I think, the hardest principle, and it's real simple. The principle is to engage everyone. Part of your job as a teacher is to engage everybody. The reality is almost every church probably in your town, every good, solid Christian church, has preachers who preach the Bible and who preach Jesus, but their church isn't growing because, if their church isn't growing, a lot of times it's probably because they're just not very engaging. They're faithful to God's word, which is great. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody or point fingers at anybody, but I'm just saying, like, if we're not engaging our culture, then what do we have? If you get up there and teach and you are not engaging, you should say, put me back on the bench, because I'm not good at engaging the crowd. If you're not good at engaging, it's okay. Preaching's not the greatest thing you can do. The greatest thing you can do is to help someone pursue God. Maybe you're a better small group leader or a mentor or whatever, but teachers should be engaging. And you should engage everyone. And what we mean by that is you should engage young people, you should engage old people, you should engage seekers, you should engage believers. You should try to work, and this takes some time, this is the hardest one, but you should work on your stories, work on your delivery, work on all this stuff, work on your facial expression, everything that you do, you should try to be engaging with how you do it. Don't be complicated, but be engaging. We like to talk about these 3 C's of engaging preaching. Here's what they are. Be clear, be concise, and be compelling. So you have to have clarity. If you're not clear, then it's not very engaging. People will check out if you're not being clear. So make sure you use those talking points, get clarity for yourself, and then be clear. Someone I think once said, if it's foggy in the pulpit, it's foggy in the pew. So if it's foggy to you, if it's not clear to you what you're talking about, the talking points for your particular sermon, get clarity before you get up there on stage. Be clear. The second C is to be concise. You won't be very engaging if you aren't concise. I don't know if you noticed, but in our sermons, we try to shoot for 25 to 30 minutes in our video sermons. Now, in a live context, you might be able to go a little bit longer than that. But generally speaking, I don't care how good of a teacher you are, if you go too long, you're going to lose people and you're not going to be very engaging anymore. Now, you can debate this, and you certainly should talk about this with your pastor and talk about what some of your parameters are on your time at your service. But again, our video sermons are trying to demonstrate being concise. You know, we used to preach for 35, 40 minutes, and we're like, especially on video, we don't think that works. We're not that good. No offense, but you're probably not that good either. So be concise. Leave them wanting more. It's way better for them to say, oh, I wanted more, than for them to say, oh, he just kept going on and on and on. So be concise. If you want to be engaging, a real simple tip for that is just to be concise. And then the last C of engaging preaching is to be compelling. So be clear, concise, and compelling. You have to be compelling, and that means you compel them to do something. Make sure that you're at the end of the sermon, you're saying, well, so what? Who cares? So I just heard this truth about Noah. Who cares? What does that mean for my life? Compel them to act. Remember our pursuit process, you know, the 3 steps we always talk about for small groups, families, whatever. It's you discover the truth, you talk about the truth with people in your life that you trust, small group, whoever. And then the third thing on all of our discussion guides, the third thing is you live it out. Compel them to live it out. Now, you can't do that for them. You can't live it for them, but you can compel them. And engaging preaching is compelling preaching. You're compelling them to live it out. Okay, so principle 1, teach the Bible. Principle 2, engage everyone. And the third principle, the last principle for great teaching as far as we're concerned is this: empower conversations. Now, I know that seems maybe really specific, but this is really important for you to understand this. Your goal as a preacher is to support the discipleship infrastructure of your church. That's it. You're not supposed to be a maverick. You're not trying to get people to worship and adore you. You're trying to get them to focus on Jesus. But really, we don't believe that anyone will be able to live out the truth that they're hearing in your wonderful sermon just by hearing a wonderful sermon this week, and then coming back next week and hearing another wonderful sermon, and coming back next week. I don't care how great the sermons are. That's not going to do it. Your ultimate job as a teacher, and you got to really keep this in mind, and this is what all of our resources are built around, and this is why we think it's important to use resources, because we're empowering you, we're equipping you as a teacher to empower conversations in your church. You know, if you say, hey, I want to preach my own sermon aside from the resources at pursueGOD.org, that's wonderful. But we would certainly hope that as a part of that, then that means you're going to write a kids thing, a youth thing. You're going to write small group material. You're going to link them to this greater library of truth. And most people just don't have the energy or the time to do that. That's why we're putting so much energy and time into it. That's why the teaching team at pursueGOD.org is just filled with people who all week long, all they're doing is resourcing people. They're resourcing you as a teacher to get up there and resource your people. We're equipping you with the tools so that when you preach a sermon, when you use those talking points and you talk about the resources online and all that kind of stuff, that all of that stuff is designed so that you can get up there and preach a great, engaging sermon, Bible-centered, Christ-centered sermon. And at the end of that sermon, you can say, now go home and talk about it. Now go talk about it with your small group. Now go talk about it with your mentor. So remember, this third and last principle is your last thing is you should empower conversations. You should get people to go and talk about it. And if you do your job right, hopefully you'll do that. So those are the 3 teaching principles that we have in mind. Now use that discussion guide and talk about it with your trainer or your pastor.